So the Mega Evolutions format is officially here, and after our first two major events, we've got our first meta shakeup. Mega Kangaskhan EX and Mega Absol EX didn't just show up in numbers, they dominated. And in this video today, we're going to be talking about how you can adapt your decks into the upcoming meta. Now, if you're practicing to play for your next upcoming regional, or whether it's your locals like League Cups and Challenges, I'm sure that you've hit this deck on the PTCG live ladder if you've loaded that up recently as well. So we want to know how to make our decks better and how not to suck. In today's video, I'm going to be covering everything that happened in those major events, as well as how we can adapt to some of the brand new decks that we saw appearing in the Mega Evolutions format. So stick around and let's take a look at how we can adapt and not suck. Now, the first thing I want to talk about here is the amazing win by Jackson Ford from Canada with Charizard EX, Pidgeot EX. Now, this is a deck that we haven't seen in some time dominate the format, but back in its day, it was one of the driving forces behind the meta. Now, adapting to the meta, knowing that Gardevoir EX was probably going to be one of the most played decks, we knew that Charizard would definitely be great because it has that darkness typing as the advantage, where all of the Pokemon in Gardevoir generally will have a dark weakness. Now, knowing that and seeing which other decks would be out there, we knew that there were going to be a lot of dark decks. I talked about it in my video that you can check here over on the meta predictions, where we thought decks like Zoroark EX and also Grimmsnarl EX were all going to be dominating, and we did see that in troves. So let's take a look at how the meta actually broke down. Now, we can see here that the most successful decks were going to be Gholdengo, then Gardevoir, Dragapult, Charizard, Marnie's Grimmsnarl, and then Ceruledge. To round out the top 8, we did have the brand new Mega Absol deck, which we'll talk about in just a second, and then Terrabox, which is one of my predictions here. So having all of these decks in the counts, this is just ranking by the most successful on the LimitlessTCG.com data mine. And with that being said, we knew that Gholdengo was going to be a good deck going into this event, but we didn't know that it was going to have that high of a percentage, where it brought home the most championship points out of any deck. Now, it wasn't necessarily the most played deck, but it did have the most success rate in conversion. From day 1 to day 2, that's what we look at with this type of data. How many wins did it get? How many championship points did it actually bring home? Now, Gardevoir is also one of the highest played decks in the meta. I know that the Pokemon graphic for the day 1 of TCG did have it broken down into 2 separate groups. One was standard Gardevoir, and the other one was Gardevoir with Jellicent EX as its primary attacker and driving force to stop items and potentially tools in the list. Now, we did see a high conversion rate for decks like Charizard and Grimmsnarl here, which Grimmsnarl was in a lot of people's minds going into this event, where it would be having an increase in success with the Lily's Determination card being released in the Mega Evolutions format. Marnie's Grimmsnarl does struggle with drawing cards towards the late game, and Lily's Determination giving you that fresh 6 cards if you've taken some prize cards already, or maybe even 8 cards if you haven't, is going to assist in the consistency of these decks. Now, looking at more decks in the meta, we want to take a look a little bit further at the Mega Absol Box. Now, this was piloted by the one and only Tord Redcliffe, one of the best players in the world and best deck builders in the world known to date. And we saw so many great players. So let's break down this list and see what cards are generally in it. Now, we see Precious Trolley is the ace spec that was primarily used in this list. We do have Cornerstones, we have Petrarunt EXs, Latias EXs, Blood Moon, Ursaluna. We've got the new Psyduck promo card. Mega Kangaskhan is our driving force for draw engine here. It does have the ability that lets you draw 2 extra cards as long as it's in the active. And then Mega Absol has 2 different attacks that we want to spend some time on. Terminal Period states that when our opponent has exactly 6 damage counters on there, they can just be knocked out. Now, the secondary attack, Call of Darkness, is one of my favorite attacks because it is a hand control attack. And if you don't know what that means, hand control signifies that you are controlling, obviously, your opponent's hand, and you are taking resources out of it. You get to cherry pick resources. And what's nice about this attack is it not only gets to see your opponent's hand, but you get to discard these cards. It's not shuffling back into the deck. They are going to go right into the discard pile, which can really put your opponent on the back burner for how their tempo is going to go and how you can start winning some games. So I really love the inclusion of Mega Absol in here. And what gets you to the damage counter modification to get Terminal Period online is going to be the Monkey Dory. Now, Tor did play 3 Monkey Dory in their list, and I see that 2 are at least in everybody's list that played in this tournament, and we could see 2 across the board for the majority. Now, there are some players that opted for only 1 Cornerstone, but 2 has been the best way to play it for what I've seen and how I feel with this deck for the Cornerstone Ogerpon, just because it helps you in so many matchups like your Zoroark, like your Marnie's Grimmsnarl, like your Gholdengo, which is really important, we'll talk about in a second. But I did want to spend some time on the list going over all the key parts. Now, we do have Lily's Determination to draw cards. There's Boss's Orders to bring things up into the active. And Penny is a card that we haven't seen as a supporter in some time, since the days of Snorlax Control or Snorlax Stall. And Penny is such a great card because you are playing all basics in this list. So even if you are taking some chip damage or getting damage counters spread to you, you can just pick your basic Pokemon up. Now, it is difficult because a lot of those basic Pokemon, you are also trying to load these basic energy. But what's nice about Penny over cards like Professor Turo's Scenario is the cards don't get discarded, they just go back into your hand. So it might take you a few extra steps to get loaded as far as that goes for your energy counts to get these attacks off, but you are putting those resources back into your hand. Now, another card that we see a high count of in this list is going to be Arven. Arven is the driving force in the engine. Obviously, we talked about Precious Trolley here being the A-spec of choice, so we are going to have a high Arven count. Now, the thing to know about this deck is that you don't want to apply your tools too early because we do have Bravery Charm to bump up the HP of a lot of our Pokemon, but TM Turbo Energize is going to be the primary one you want to search out in these lists so you can get energy on the field. Now, obviously, if you have multiple Pokemon on your bench because you've used Precious Trolley, you know that you have to be cautious about where those energies are going. And also, another thing to note is that you don't care so much about the early turns as long as you have your Lively Stadium, which is a stadium we haven't seen too often other than in Control lists, having the boosting effect for HP on basic Pokemon. It does give you plus 40, so it's almost a Bravery Charm, but we do get to boost our HP if we have one of these in maybe our opening hands, or we draw it really early with Kangaskhan's effect or what have you. If we get this onto the field, we won't care about boosting the HP so much in the early opening turns, and we can always add those Bravery Charms in afterwards. Now, we are playing Mist Energy, which is a key card in this list, and I think that we're going to see more Mist Energy played in a lot of other decks going forward. And having this card here is going to help you in the mirror match because you don't want to have Terminal Period happen to one of your 3 prize Pokemon. Now, mind you, these Mega Pokemon aren't the greatest because they do give up 3 prizes, but they do have some amazing attacks. Now, the final card I do want to talk about here, because I am seeing some lists only playing 1, but the Yveltal in this list is so good. Now, using the combo of Pecharunt EX, bringing Pokemon to the active that are dark Pokemon, poisoning them, Yveltal has a free retreat cost. So you can free retreat this out of the active even if you don't have the Latias EX in play to make all your basics have 0 retreat. You can just push this into the active and then push something else into the active afterwards. So it counts as a free switch card, and you don't even have to play an item in a lot of cases. And it also has the trapping attack here. So it's got clutch, it does 20 damage. Now, if those Pokemon are weak to dark Pokemon, you are doing 40 damage, and you have your Monkey Dories to back up if damage gets pushed onto your field. If it's poisoned, you're doing damage to yourself, and you can push that damage. There's so many ways that you can utilize this and play, and that's why this deck is a driving force into the meta. Let's take a look at Tord's list and see how that, in comparison with some of the other top 8 lists, looked. All right, now here's Tord's list. As you can see, the 3 Monkey Dory count is excellent here. Tord did add Tatsugiri, so that way you can go in and attract customers, find your supporter cards. That's also a really good tech. I don't know if it's really needed here, but it's definitely something that I do enjoy playing in a lot of other deck lists. We do see the energy switch in only a single count, where I've seen other lists play 2 of these cards just because energy switch can come in so clutch in so many different matchups. I do like having 2 energy switch, so maybe that's something I would cut the Tatsugiri for. I'm seeing only 3 penny, where we saw a lot of other lists play 4 penny, and 3 Pokegear. So Pokegear is something that is a little slept on. It's basically your own item card version of Tatsugiri, but having item lock be apparent in so many decks that play not only Budu, but also the Jellicent line, I don't know if I would want to have the Pokegear, but it's great on those opening turns just to get your Arven out. That way you can trolley. It just helps the Arven trolley combo happen easier. So I can see where the mindset is there. Do I agree with it? Maybe not going forward into the future of the meta, but this is a solid list, solid starting point if you want to get somewhere with this list. So let's take a look at the higher placing list from Hale here in the top 4. Okay, looking at Hale's list in comparison, we do see only 2 Monkey Dory, went down in the Monkey Dory, no Tatsugiri, but there is Budu to do an item lock play maybe later in the game. I do like that. I don't know how interested I'd be in including it in my list, but we can notice that there is a higher count of penny in this list, and we also have Boss's Orders in a 4 count. A lot of our supporters here, aside from Iono, are going to be in that higher 4 count, which is really nice for consistency. Obviously, we can see Hale went down in the Pokegears, and that helped out in consistency overall. There is only 1 TM Energize, but there is the counter gain in here. That's a tool card that we didn't see in every single list, but it definitely helps you out against those decks that are going ahead in the prize race, and then you're able to only have to attach really 2 energy. Now, Kangaskhan can attack, and we didn't talk about that yet, but Kangaskhan attacks for 200 base, and then you can flip and see if you can get an extra 50 damage on there. So it's a pretty good attack in a lot of cases, especially if you're ramping up with Monkey Dory damage. I would maybe cut something here for an extra Monkey Dory damage. What I will talk about is there are 2 Earthen Vessels. That's something I've noticed playing the deck, is that Earthen Vessel is something that I want a lot of the time. And that reasoning is because energy is hard to come by in a deck that you might not be drawing a lot of cards with. So having that double Earthen Vessel is so good to get your TM Energize off. So that is something I think that we'll see in future lists to come. Now, if we shift gears here over to Belo Horizonte, we can see that there was a domination of this style deck, as well as a couple others sprinkled in here. We saw Gardevoir taking another win here, and this one is by the great Gustavo Wada, who also played Mega Gardevoir EX. So another Mega that we didn't really expect to see, but we had one of in this list for Mega Gardevoir. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but we can see the Mega Absol Box or Mega Kangaskhan box here in numbers as well. So just looking at the top 8 here, we also had more Gardevoir. We knew that was going to dominate. We've got Joltik box, which is something I didn't expect, but Diego did have a really fine-tuned list, and it was pretty good for the event, apparently. But we do see a lot of Gardevoir here, and then just going through the top 8, it's pretty much the same. If we even look at maybe the top 16 lists, we can see here that there's not much that changed. There was a Raging Bolt in here, as well as an Archaludon, and those are decks that we didn't really expect to see. A Grimmsnarl in here, top 4, really great, but the meta was a little different for sure. If we look at the statistics here, we still had Gholdengo at the top for win percentage. So that tells me that maybe Gholdengo needs to find a new way to beat some of the best decks in the meta. But again, we look at these top decks, we're still up there with the amount of top decks that we wanted to see and some decks that we were expecting anyway. So with that being said, let's take a look at how we can adapt the meta. So let's spend a little time talking about why these decks were successful. We obviously saw decks like Gardevoir rise in popularity over the past few major events, and we knew that it was going to be a driving force. So again, Absol hitting for weakness, doing 200 damage, and taking resources out of Gardevoir's hand was great. We saw decks like Gholdengo rise because we have the Solrock Lunatone engine, and they actually fell off because Cornerstone was a key role player in a lot of these Absol decks. Now, Cornerstone Ogerpon shuts off so many other decks, including decks like Charizard that won the event. So how could Charizard adapt? We have Mist Energy in the list. We have Chi-Yu in the list. There are so many gust effects to get around Pokemon. And once knockouts have been taken against Charizard, it can pump out enough damage to knock out a Mega Kangaskhan EX. And that's really how you want to play these games. I know that having Chi-Yu in play a lot of the times is how you are getting around these cornerstone walls that you're being faced against, and that is how most likely the Charizard deck wins. And also Jackson's deck had Dusknoir and Super Rod. You got to put the Dusknoir back into the deck so you can pop it over and over again. That ramps up the Charizard damage. So unless there's 2 cornerstones in play, this Charizard deck can just run over. I'm going to use a new tool here next to talk about how we can adapt our decks going forward, knowing why decks fell off and why these new decks are better. So let's take a look at this new tool here. So this is a new site that I found. This is Ciphermaniac.com, and they have been awesome. I've actually been looking at a lot of data on here, but this shows the play rate of a lot of these different cards that are commonly found in the meta, and this actually analyzes it by which event. So we could see all the cards being utilized. Now we see a lower percentage for cards I talked about like Mist Energy, and I feel like that might go higher in count again with Absol. We did see a little bit of an uptick for Briar. Again, we have decks like Terrabox, decks like Charizard, which have the Terra Pokemon. We obviously saw a new inclusion for Lunatone Solrock. So how can we adapt with this data? We can use this and see exactly what we want to be adding into our lists. We can see the counts of specific cards. We did see Hilda kind of on the decline here. Again, decks like Dragapult were lower in the meta. We see that maybe Teal Mask Ogerpon should be making a comeback. So I think that with this data, we're going to see a few more grass type decks come into the meta because they can hit Absol for weakness. They can also hit Charizard for weakness. So those two in combination, we might see more Teal Mask decks. There's decks out there that are kind of fringe like the Flapple EX deck or Hydrapple EX. That's the one. That we'll see. Now, another card that I think that we're going to see more of in Gardevoir lists is actually going to be the Bravery Charm. Now, Bravery Charm, I'm sure it's up here, as we could see it right over here. Bravery Charm is going to be another card I think that we're going to see more counts of for Gardevoir decks because we can now use Drifloon for those higher HP Pokemon and take a 3-prize turn. That's exactly what we want to try to do. Maybe even see some more energy counts, more Psychic Energy, maybe more Monkey Dory, and move away from the Jellicent version. And I see a downtick for TMD Evolution. Now, TMD Evolution is something that we don't really care about when we have basic decks. Another card I didn't see too much of, but I think that we're going to see an increase of, and I'll scroll through to see if we find it in here, are cards like Enhanced Hammer. Enhanced Hammer is going to allow us to take away those missed energies, especially in the mirror. I do think that we're going to see a lot more special energies come back into the format. Xerosik's Machinations, and I can never pronounce the second word in there. So if you know how to pronounce it correctly, let me know down in the comments below. But I think Xerosik is going to be another card that should see an uptick because there's so many decks that are building their hand wide, and then having the combination of Xerosik, if you're playing Absol, if that's the deck that you choose you want to play, Xerosik plus Call of Darkness is such a great hand control tool in combination. It's such a great combo, so I think we'll see a little bit more of that. We did see a few control lists out there that were playing Xerosik plus an Absol, and I think that that's something else. I did see Unfair Stamp. We saw one of the Fernandez brothers do really well in Masters for Belo, and using Unfair Stamp in their list for Absol Box. I think that that's a really cool inclusion. Another thing that we saw is the Enamorous. Enamorous here was a tech by Henry Chow and Henry Chow's following that we got to see in here. We saw Mega Lucario EX, and still on the fence with Mega Lucario. I think that there's better ways to play a Gholdengo tech, but we did see that Austin Charles did put Mega Lucario EX in their list to combat the Cornerstone, which is really good. Regigigas is a card that we don't see very many decks play, but I know that there are those grass decks that are playing it. Toadscruel, not so heavy in play because we're not trying to counter Gholdengo as much anymore, but those trapping Pokemon like the Sudowoodo, the Maractus, and then the Yveltal, I think that those are going to see more play going forward. We did see a huge bump in Ceruledge, which we haven't talked about in this video so far, but Ceruledge is a driving force. A lot of people are dropping Raging Bolt to go for Ceruledge, and that's something that I've seen more and more. Iron Leafs is another tech card that we see as a grass attacker into the Mega Absol decks, and I think that maybe Ultra Ball in combination, because Iron Leaves can get ripped out of your hand if it's already there by Call of Darkness. Those are things to consider. Now, Joltik, not really high in play, so all of those Joltik Gholdengo decks aren't seeing a lot of play. We are seeing more Eevee box. So if we add more Leafeons into the list, maybe we have a better chance. And there's no fighting Eevee, unfortunately, in the realm of Pokemon. But utilizing maybe a Cornerstone to combat the Mega Kangaskhan could be a good inclusion. Now, this is a card I want to stop and talk about. It's Tool Scrapper. I think that we're going to see more Tool Scrapper in the list because of those things like the Bravery Charms in not only the Absol list, but also into the Gardevoir list, like I was talking about earlier. Having the Tool Scrapper is going to be so good, and a lot of those matchups can just buy you an extra prize card. So knowing that that's something that might take place is really good here. Dragapult playing more counts of Tool Jammer, Terrabox playing the Jamming Tower. That's rather what I was talking about. Jamming Tower could be really good. And then Team Rocket's Watchtower, we can see a little bit of a spike here with Team Rocket's Watchtower, but really good against Kangaskhan. Also really good in Mega Kangaskhan because then you can hit through opposing cornerstones. You are shutting your own ability off, so that is a consideration going forward if you're going to be playing, again, the Mega Absol deck. Now, here's a card that kind of fell off, is Togekiss. We talked about Gholdengo. Gholdengo is now removing the Togekiss line because you have single prize attackers. Maybe it's time to put Togekiss back in. I don't think that that's actually the play. I think that we're going to see more decks adapt, Gholdengo being one of them. And I have my own personal list for Gholdengo, which I'll share for you in just a little bit here. But I think that Togekiss and maybe some other lists could be kind of cute to play. It does require a 3-card slot, which could be really tight in these other lists. Again, control-ish style lists. But I think that Togekiss could see a comeback eventually. Is it going to be in Gholdengo? I'm not sure. We did see Crustle have a little bit of a resurgence, but I think that with Gardevoir in the format, Crustle is just not it. Crustal just being pummeled to the ground with a lot of these single prize decks. Honestly, single prize decks are probably going to be on the rise here. I think that we are going to see a little bit more consistency with some of those single prize decks we didn't see before. Typhlosion might see a comeback. I've seen a couple of Festival Lead decks have a little bit of popularity in local events, so some ways that you can adapt. The last card I want to talk about, and this is a Gardevoir card, is going to be Fluttermane. Now, Fluttermane's really cool because you can trap things in the active spot that might have a free retreat because you're shutting off abilities. So Latias having a free retreat, you can push Fluttermane into the active, shut off Latias. Fluttermane in the active can also help if you're going to Iono your opponent and they have Mega Kangaskhan in the active, shuts off that draw power. So really, really good here. I think Fluttermane is going to see a lot more play if you're playing Gardevoir. So those are ways that you can adapt your deck. So I'm going to take one deck. It's one of my personal favorites. I've been playing a lot of Gholdengo lately, and I'm going to share with you how myself, as well as Logan McKay, who's a great player from Canada, adapted the list and how we're probably going to play it going forward at these events. All right, so let's talk about this adapted Gholdengo list. Again, Gholdengo was one of the best conversion rates at both of the major events. So if we're going to adapt this to the meta, we know that there's decks out there that prey on other decks with abilities. We know that there's Frostlass in a lot of those Marnie's Grimmsnarl decks. Cornerstone's a huge card, and not only Zoroark, but also, as we see, Absol Box. And then Gardevoir really struggles with the core engine of the Gholdengo deck anyway, because they're higher HP Pokemon, 2 prize Pokemon, and it's harder to get around things. And you have Air Balloon in case you get confused. There's so many ways that you can play against Gardevoir, and because Gardevoir was one of the highest play rates going into day 1 of Milwaukee, we can adapt Gholdengo. And as you can see here, the count is pretty straightforward. We've got a 4-4 count of Gholdengo to combat other Gardevoir lists. We have our single prize attackers / draw engine in the Lunatone and Solrock. These are all pretty common cards that you see here, but adapting, we've got the Great Tusk EX. Now, Great Tusk is actually the elephant in the room here. We're going to talk about how good this card is. Into Cornerstone, we can smack a Cornerstone as long as there's no Lively Stadium in play, and as long as there's no Charm in play at the same time, we can smack this thing for 1 hit. It does 250 damage for 3 fighting energy. How are we going to get the fighting energy on PJ? Tell me how we're going to do it. If you could see below, our tool list has changed a little bit. We have 2 air balloons now, 1 Vitality Band, and Vitality Band's really good in the Jellicent matchup because they are trying to item lock you. But we have the TM Turbo Energize, just like the Mega Absol deck. If we see some downplay and a lot of other things, and we see that maybe Charizard's trying to adapt here too, we can go really early and aggressive with the TM Turbo Energize, put 2 fighting energy, because we play 8 in this list, onto the Great Tusk and just keep smashing through. Now, we don't really care too much in the matchup now against Charizard because things like Chi-Yu are really the only threat a lot of the time until we get to the late game. We can be hyper aggressive with this list. We can start picking off smaller things and then just take out Charizards or Pidgeots. That's really what you want to go for. I did cut down on the supporters in this list, but we're playing for Arven because we're playing TM Turbo Energize, and we have the Mega Absol list just coming up. We've got a lot of consistency when it comes to the 4 Fighting Gongs, and we've got 3 Nest Balls, 2 Buddy Poffin, a Precious Trolley as our A-Spec, so we can get all of our Pokemon out that we need, so we can go turn 1, TM Energize, and Precious Trolley, or maybe turn 2 if we have to, depending on if we go first or second. This list does generally want to go first, but you're kind of okay going second because you can still attack the first turn of the game with a single prize Pokemon. You can still set up a single prize board if you want. So it's got a lot of different lines to it, and that gives it depth to the overall deck list. But this is what you should be thinking of when you're trying to build your list for the new format, is how can I adapt? Where are the weaknesses? The weaknesses were Cornerstone and being bludgeoned to death because all of our cards are ability cards, right? We have tons of abilities on the field. We don't want to have multiple prize knockouts, and we have to adapt. And that's exactly how we do it. We bring down the Ciphermaniacs, we bring up the counts of the counter cards, and we're able to just keep the consistency up as well as teching for our bad matchups. So that's how I want you to be thinking about your decks in the future after this meta has started to evolve here. We're doing Las Vegas regionals next month, and we'll be doing a full meta breakdown. So let's talk about some things for the future. Now, I know we've talked about a lot of Pokemon in this video, and there was a lot to go back and rewatch. So I want to thank you so much for making it this far in the video now. If you do like the content that my channel is putting out here on How Not to Suck, make sure you're hitting the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel for more updates, and leave comments down below because I love to see the comments. It gives me ideas for what I can create for you so you can learn how to play Pokemon TCG better. Now, with all that being said, we looked at how the meta was shaping up. We looked at the most popular decks. We saw decks come out of the woodwork that weren't good and now have that consistency, just like we were talking about on some of the other videos on the channel. Now you have that knowledge. You've seen some new tools that you can utilize. You can go on LimitlessTCG.com and look at all the deck lists now. They're all available for you, and you can make your own decisions. Pick a deck right now for the meta. We're not going to shift until Phantasmal Flames, which won't be even legal until the end of November, early December. So don't worry about it just yet. Pick a deck that you really like. Maybe it's Charizard. Maybe it is this Mega Absol deck. Maybe it's Gholdengo. Find a deck that you like and adapt to the meta. Take it, run with it, learn your matchups, and hopefully you don't suck, or you suck less than when you did before you watched this video. I'm going to be putting out a lot more deck profiles and a lot more meta analysis for the upcoming Pokemon season, so make sure that you're sticking around. I'm PJ, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.